Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about the DNS. It is nothing but it is a domain name system. In the outline of this session, we are going to learn about need for DNS, namespace, and DNS in the internet. Okay, what is DNS? So it is nothing but DNS is a client-server application program, which is used to support the other application program. And also DNS, the main purpose of it is to use to map a host name in the application layer to an IP address in the network layer. So DNS system just translates a name to an address. So for an example, in order to identify an entity, a TCP/IP protocol suite uses the IP address to identify a uniquely identifies a host which is connected in the internet. Okay. So, however, people prefer to use names instead of network addresses. So for that, we need a system to translate a particular name to a particular IP address. For that, DNS is used. And when the internet was small, this host file was used. Host file, it comprised of two sections. One is name and address. Here, name is completely assigned to an address. So if a user wanted to map a name to an address, a host, host can easily found the particular address for the name. But the drawback is that the host file, huge amount of traffic on the internet. So in order to avoid that, so we had a great solution, that is DNS. So in the domain name system, it can translate a name to an IP address. Okay, so in this figure here, this figure shows that how TCP/IP protocol suite uses a DNS client and DNS server to map a name to an IP address. So take for an example, if a user wants to use a file transfer client in order to access a file transfer server to make a connection in the remote host, okay, which is running in the remote host. For an example, if a user wants to search for any website address, any URL, say google.com. Okay, so if it is a host name, here the first step is that user passes host name to the file transfer client. Okay, so this file transfer client, and the second step, it just pass the host name to the DNS client. So from the DNS client, it passes the query as a message regarding the requesting the IP address, corresponding IP address from the file transfer client, okay, file transfer server. So for that, whenever a system after being booted, the IP address of any IP address of the DNS server will be stored in the system. So with the known IP address of the DNS server, this DNS client will pass the query requesting the IP address of the file transfer server. So when the query is received by the DNS server, it just get the address from the file transfer server and it sends back the response to the DNS client. So from the DNS client, the IP address is passed to the file transfer client. So once the file transfer client receives the IP address, it just makes the connection and the file transfer can be done. So this is the process which is performed to map a name to a particular IP address. So in order to transfer any file from the file transfer client to file transfer server, we need two connections. So one is that DNS client and DNS server connection. So this plays a major role to map a name to an IP address. And after that, this connection, a file transfer can be done. Next is about namespace. So whatever the name is assigned to a machine, it should be unique. So here the namespace that maps each address to a unique name, it can be organized into two ways. One is that flat namespace, another one is a hierarchical namespace. So flat namespace is nothing but names assigned to an address. Here name, it is comprised of sequence of characters which is simply assigned to an address. But the major drawback in the flat namespace is that it cannot be used in a large system such as internet. So coming to hierarchical namespace, it has the solution over this drawback. Here, it is divided into three parts. One is that nature of the organization. Second part describes the name of an organization. And third part, it describes the departments in the organization. Take for an example, if we assume that we have two colleges and one company, and two colleges, they separate website address. For example, college one has abc.edu and college two has xyz.edu, and company has a website address of media.com. For an example, all these organizations, they are using system, and they system computer system, and they have named their system, one of the system, as a challenger. Okay, so all these organization uses this challenger for their computer system, same name which is going to be used. Now these addresses, in order suppose if you want to access this challenger in the particular organization, then the address will get changed. For college one, it is challenger.abc.edu, and for college two is that challenger.xyz.edu, and for third one, company, challenger.media.com. Even though it is using challenger common name for all the three organizations, but the addresses will be different. So here in the hierarchical namespace, it assigns the controls, the authority. It can be decentralized. So this will not affect a part of name as similar. So need not worry about any organization if it has the same name, which is that is using the used about the any other organization. So even if a name is common, but the entire address will not be same. The entire address will get differ. And the next one is that domain namespace. Here the domain namespace, DNS, it was designed in the inverted tree structure. It has a root and it has a tree format like many subtrees. Okay, so here we have the first part is that label. So each and every node has a label. So in the tree, each and every node has a label. And the domain name in the tree, each and every node has a domain name. That is, every label, that is sequence of label, is separated by the dots. That is called as a domain name. And the third one is that fully qualified domain name, which is nothing but is the FQDN. FQDN, it has the full name. For example, challenger.atc.fhda.edu. So all the labels will be given in the name. So if we give this name to the DNS client in order to get the address from the DNS server, so whenever this name is passed, it automatically receives the IP address from the DNS server. So the next one is that partially qualified domain name, PQDN. So here only part of a name is passed, that is challenger. So if a part of a name is passed, then the DNS client will add the suffix to the particular name. Then it pass this name to the DNS server. Okay. So here DNS client will automatically adds the suffix to a particular name. That is partially qualified domain name. And the example of the domain name and label. So as I said, each and every node has a label. For example, edu, fhda, and atc challenges. These are the labels. And the domain name is nothing but all the labels which are separated by the dots. For an example, edu dot, then fhda.edu dot, it is the domain name. Then atc.fhda.edu dot, that is the domain name. So here challenger.atc.fhda.edu. So each and every labels are separated by the dots. So that is the domain name. And now DNS in the internet. So DNS is a protocol, and it can be used in a different platform in the internet. It has three domains. So one is that generic domain, then country domain, and the inverse domain. So in the generic domain, here every host is registered according to the generic behavior. Take for an example, as we know that DNS is it was designed in the inverted tree structure. Okay, here the first level, actually the tree structure has totally 128 levels, 0 to 127 level. 0 is the starting, so there is a root level. Okay, so the first level, we have the generic domain. So here arrow, it describes the airlines. Then biz, it describes the business related things. Then com, it describes the a commercial organization. Then coop, cooperative organization. Edu, it describes the about the education. Then gov, it about the government. So it is the first level is all about the generic behavior. All these hosts are registered according to the generic behavior. It will be coming under the generic domain. Okay, the next one is that country domain. Here the country domain is nothing but here the address, two characters will be used. So two characters, it refers a particular country. For an example, here the address anza.cup.ca.us. Here the US is refers to a United States. Okay. So the first part, I mean the country domain, this part may refer to any country, and the second part it may refers to any designation or any national or the description of the organization. It may be anything. Okay, so here US stands for United States, like that. FR stands for France, and for India IN is used. Okay, so like that. So in this example they have given ANZA, so Dianza College in Cupertino in California in United States. So it is mentioned as anza.cup.ca.us. Okay, so that's about the country domain. And the last one is about inverse domain. So inverse domain is nothing but it translates IP address to a particular name. Okay, it's just the inverse of it. So just translates IP address to a particular name. So whenever server receives a request from the client, okay, so in order to perform any task, so in that case, it inversely done the process. So here, if you take the root level and the label, so here 132 it refers the class B address. Okay, so here the net ID it should be in the higher level when compared to its subnet ID, and also the subnet ID should be in the higher level when compared to its host ID. Okay, so as we read the IP address from the order, that is the actual order is that 132.34.45.121, but according to the convention used in the DNS, it should be read accordingly from the bottom to the top. Okay, like 121.45.34.132.inaddress.arpa. So this maps an IP address to a name. This inversely done. And yes, so in this session we have learned about a brief intro about DNS, then namespace, and DNS in the internet. It has generic domain, country domain, and the inverse domain. So hope you all understand the topic of DNS, and thanks for watching the video.